The Falcons are building a brand new roster, especially on offense. The NFL draft is about a month away. The combine is past us. Murmurs are starting to float around. And wide receivers are changing homes left, right, and center. And many of them are getting just overpaid. We're going to talk about the relevant NFL news as we head to the end of March in 2024. This is your favorite offseason show in the NFL, Player Profiler Today, starting now. Welcome back to Player Profiler Today, your favorite offseason show every single day of the NFL offseason in 2024. I'm your Tuesday host, Ahan, at Ahan Rungta. It is March 19, 2024. We've got a very quick but encompassing show today, talking about everything going on in the NFL over the last few days, the mid-March stuff, the time of the year that can go a little silent in popular media when it comes to the NFL offseason, the few-week lull between the combine festivities, the actual draft. But there's been some serious action. We've had an interesting offseason so far, a little clumsy in some aspects. So let's sort it all out and talk about the main points for today. If you're listening as a podcast, make sure you come over to these streams every day of the offseason at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific, wherever you may be in the world. If you can join us for this approximately half an hour block, head over to the Player Profiler News YouTube channel or the Player Profiler Twitter. But you can ask your questions in chat on the Player Profiler YouTube chat, and we can talk. I always address comments in chat. We have a new host every day, but I'm your Tuesday host. So let's get right into today's show, which is a few people changing homes. And we're going to not necessarily go in chronological order because I do want to address a few that have already been addressed in previous Player Profiler Today shows, but I did want to bring them up in case you missed it, in case you haven't been following along every single day. Here is a very interesting one to start off on the defensive end, Chase Young. He's going to undergo neck surgery, but he has signed a one-year deal with the New Orleans Saints. He should be ready for the start of the season. A very interesting move for the Saints, a defense that has been aging in the past, and last year specifically, a very slow defense. A reputed pass rush when you look at the names on the uniforms, but just not there results-wise. The Saints obviously highly mediocre last year on offense, below mediocre on offense, but also not 100% up to their standard on defense either. So an interesting move to sign the former number 2 overall draft pick Chase Young there. More on defense, Devin White and Oren Burks head to the Philadelphia Eagles. Philly obviously been very active, especially in the offensive end this offseason, getting rid of Brian Johnson, changing the philosophy on offense there, but they also get themselves some help on defense here as well for some depth. Philly looking to compete. Obviously, they're in a Super Bowl window with Jalen Hurts at quarterback, with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert still around, and now Saquon Barkley as well. So obviously they're looking to win a division, but more importantly, they're looking to be serious Super Bowl contenders. And that pass defense last year was just not it with the Philadelphia Eagles. And one of the reasons they just had no shot against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers come playoff time on the road. So good to see them active. Howie Roseman, as always, pretty active in the offseason. And it's early. More on the defensive end. Denzel Perryman signs with the Los Angeles Chargers. And we're good. Don't worry, we're going to talk more Chargers today. A lot of stuff to talk about in that organization. Dallas Cowboys is speaking more on defense. This was, we've already known about this, but Dallas made it official that they hire Mike Zimmer as their new defensive coordinator and promote defensive backs coach Al Harris to the assistant head coach position. And they're going to keep Mike McCarthy, and whether or not you agree with that, it is what it is. That's what's going to happen. We're going to get Mike McCarthy and his interesting time management. We're going to get Mike McCarthy and his rather monotone, play calling, et cetera, et cetera. But the play calling not all on him in this organization. Made a few other additions to the staff. They've added Steve Shimko as the offensive assistant, Greg Ellis as assistant defensive line coach, and Christian Garcia as assistant defensive backs coach, and Paul Gunther as an defensive run game coordinator, and Jeff Zogina as a defensive line coach. So a lot of changes in the Cowboys coaching staff, and perhaps that prepares them better for a playoff push. A couple of other interesting names. Now we're starting to really get into the offensive aspect of it. We got offensive tackle Trent Brown heads over from the Patriots, heads over to the Cincinnati Bengals. Trent Brown, obviously not the player he once was a couple years ago, aging a little bit. Production wasn't there last year. Patriots offensive line was overall pretty bad. Trent Brown was a contributor to that. But the Bengals think that he still has some left in the tank to try to get a little bit of experience, some help for Joe Burrow. We got some running back names as well, some sneaky handcuff running backs that I do want to talk about. Running back Ty Johnson re-signed with the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, the Bills think they have something, as a starter with James Cook, but it's certainly noteworthy that James Cook, we've talked about it on some player profiler shows before, a capable pass catcher, a solid runner at his ceiling when he gets good blocking, and obviously the Buffalo Bills offensive line certainly in that category where James Cook can perform, but there have been some concerns about James Cook's ability to be a workhorse for a full season. Obviously, rough around the edges still, someone that isn't going to juke many people by himself. Number 26 last year in breakaway run rate, number 43 in yards created per touch. Also had some problems with drops, had 5 drops last year. So James Cook, far from an elite talent to lead a franchise at running back, but he can have a ceiling games. But always worth at least knowing who is in a backfield, especially when you are a fantasy manager, and especially who's in a backfield of a good offense. So Ty Johnson's going to return to that mix. Speaking of backup, so to speak, or guys that aren't front runners, Trenton Irwin, the slot receiver, re-signed to a 1-year deal with the Cincinnati Bengals. Always a look, Trenton Irwin is whenever there is an injury or whenever there is a great slot matchup for the Bengals when you're playing DFS. Everybody who plays DFS, underdog, weekly lineups, etc., you know that Trent Irwin is never a name you're just going to throw into the back burner if you're looking for a last round pick, a wide receiver 3, so to speak. So he's back with Joe Burrow and company. Obviously, T. Higgins, franchise tag him back there as well, but he has permission to seek a trade. Now we're starting to get into a little bit of the higher order names, and we're going to warm up. Don't worry about it. We're going to warm up a little bit. I want to discuss KJ Osborne because if y'all have seen the meme, heartbreaking, the worst person you know just made a good point. As a Patriots fan, this feels like heartbreaking. The worst organization you know just signed a good player. That's what's happened here. I'm pleasantly surprised that the Patriots have actually made a move for a good player. Those of you unfamiliar with KJ Osborne's game, still 26 years old, and a good player, has fit in with a Vikings offense that has been deep over the last few years, but has still found himself some relevance. Every time someone goes down, he seems to step up. And even with sharing the field with guys like Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, and last year Jordan Addison, KJ Osborne has been productive. Last year when he was playing with Adam Thielen, or I should say the previous season back in 2022, the Vikings had themselves one of the best trios in football when it comes to route win rate. KJ Osborne in the 2022 season ranked number 16 in route win rate. So this is not a bona fide alpha. He's not going to completely change a franchise, but this is a guy that is quite good as a secondary or tertiary wide receiver option. So the Patriots bringing back Hunter Henry and now adding KJ Osborne and now holding the number 3 draft pick if they do plan on keeping it. Potentially a good pass-catching core developing in New England for the first time in a few years. So exciting stuff there for New England, until we see them potentially fumble in the draft. But it's definitely worth noting KJ Osborne, perhaps the first redraft player that I personally would be interested in out of the New England Patriots in a while. So that is certainly interesting. More on the offensive end. Now we're going to warm up a little bit. Marquise Brown. We got to talk about Marquise Brown. Because Marquise Brown, we know kind of what the player he is when he is healthy. A boom or bust type. A guy that can draw a lot of targets when, there's no choice but to throw him the ball. But not necessarily the most explosive, not the most skilled, not the biggest body. A former first-round draft pick. We know his skill set, right? It's well documented on Player Profiler. Last year dealt with some injuries, but when he was healthy, was a target monster. But still, number 47 in true catch rate, number 98 in contested catch rate. So not necessarily a big body catching those contested balls. Number 121 in route win rate. So this is not a guy who's an elite route winner either. Number 67 in yards per route run. This is just an okay wide receiver in the NFL, but he gets placed in the best offensive situation in the NFL. And I don't care how deep the Buffalo Bills get. I don't care, if Caleb Williams becomes Patrick Mahomes 2.0 eventually. The Kansas City Chiefs are easily the best situation for a wide receiver, especially one who has some boom potential week to week with his speed, with his experience to, catch a deep ball, has played with an MVP in Lamar Jackson before, but still hasn't played with Patrick Mahomes, and playing with Patrick Mahomes, just another level. So Marquise Brown, dynasty owners, you have lucked out. He has landed with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. And this is not a Kadarius Toney situation where even though it's a great offensive situation, the player is so bad that they fade away and make way to guys like Justin Watson and Sky Moore. This is not the case here. Marquise Brown, a capable player, someone that can draw targets and draw red zone targets as well. So I mentioned on a show a few weeks ago on Player Profiler that the Super Bowl Kansas City Chiefs with Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Mecole Hardman catching passes in the Super Bowl. This is the worst the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be in a while. Well, you're seeing it right here. They already they still have Kelsey. They still have Rashee Rice. And now they have a solid number 2 or number 3 option in Marquise Brown. So the Chiefs, the rich get richer. The Chiefs have gotten better with this move. More on offense and something that this is a name that I didn't think would be super relevant in the offseason until I saw where he signed, and that is Joshua Dobbs. Obviously, we know Brock Purdy is the future in San Francisco. We know that he is a good starter in the NFL at this point. Brock Purdy is not, a Jimmy Garoppolo. We know this. He's proven time and again that even when the going gets rough, he can be a good quarterback in the NFL. He can compete with the best of the best. But, of course, Joshua Dobbs in an elite situation now in San Francisco. Dobbs, not the best thrower of the football, not even a top 20 thrower of the football in the NFL. But you can make an argument by some metrics that Josh Dobbs is a top 30 QB in the NFL, better than a few starters. And now he goes to the San Francisco 49ers, obviously as a pure backup, but worth noting that if something were to happen to Brock Purdy, God forbid, for a couple of weeks, Josh Dobbs, a certainly viable fill-in. He's filled in for good quarterbacks in the past and performed. And now he gets the best offensive situation he is going to get is in his entire career alongside a Kyle Shanahan system that even if they lose Brandon Ayuk, they still have a capable player in Deebo Samuel after the catch. They still got George Kittle. And they got guys that are coming up. They can still add in the draft, but also they got a guy like Ronnie Bell, a very good athletic profile. So the Kyle Shanahan system, and obviously let's not forget Christian McCaffrey as well. So Josh Dobbs has a chance to be fantasy relevant in Week 18 if he plays there, but also just hang around in the system. And the San Francisco 49ers have got themselves a good enough backup quarterback. Worth mentioning for sure. And now we get into the biggest news of the last few days, the big 3 names that y'all are really here for. We've got some offensive linemen also signing with with the Lions. We got Kevin Zietler. Again, this is a situation of the rich getting richer because the Lions, one of the best offensive lines in football last year, top 5 in pretty much every metric. One of the big reasons Jared Goff was looking like a star for a majority of the season. One of the reasons that run game was so lethal. One of the reasons the Lions were perhaps the Cinderella story on offense in 2023 and competed against the 49ers in that playoff game. The rich get richer here as their offensive line just got better as they take Kevin Zietler from the Baltimore Ravens and add him to the Lions. And we have got some offensive names, some big offensive names going on here. I want to start with the elephant in the room, and that is Calvin Ridley. That happened a few days ago. Calvin Ridley goes from the Jacksonville Jaguars to the Tennessee Titans. And the thing with Calvin Ridley is this. I like Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley is a good wide receiver in this league. The 1 year off where he was suspended for gambling did him well because he was healthy, right? This was not a surgery situation. This was not an injury situation where Calvin Ridley had to recover and he was just going past the age apex with working on his body. Calvin Ridley was away from the game, getting healthy, and he showed flashes of excellence last year with Trevor Lawrence and company. That wide receiver room was not deep. So Ridley had a lot of responsibility alongside Christian Kirk and Evan Engram. And Calvin Ridley ran 100% of the routes last year, so completely healthy that full season. Number 3 in red zone targets. He was commanding that red zone volume. And even though there were some drop issues, number 59 in route win rate, number 16 in total route wins, though, Calvin Ridley was certainly a viable top wide receiver in the NFL and a best ball boom potential kind of guy throughout last season. He did have some lows, but the highs certainly paid out. Worth noting that 2 of his highs came against the Tennessee Titans, who had a pass funnel defense last season. So the Tennessee Titans clearly saw what he did to them, and they were impressed. In Week 11 against the Titans, he had 103 yards on 110 air yards, 7 receptions, 2 touchdowns on 9 targets. And then in Week 18, 106 yards on 156 air yards, 6 catches on 10 targets, and 1 touchdown. So the Tennessee Titans said, we want some of that, and we want to connect him to Will Levis's rocket arm. So I think for 2024 redraft purposes, this is a good fit because Will Levis has an arm still very rough around the edges. He's going to make mistakes, but for best ball, for fantasy football redraft purposes, if you're looking for a stack of a guy who can throw you 400 yards and 3 touchdowns on any given day, and a wide receiver who can catch 2 of those touchdowns, maybe put up 70-plus receiving yards, we have ourselves one in Will Levis and Calvin Ridley. And if the Titans are going to continue to be below average as a football team, especially on the defensive side of the ball, that's even more good news for fantasy owners who have Levis and Ridley. So a certainly viable fantasy stack for redraft purposes in 2024. Where you get me here is the deal because Calvin Ridley just simply overpaid here, nearing 30 years old. And Calvin Ridley, the deal with the Titans for 2 years, $62 million, 4 years, $92 million with the Tennessee Titans. A lot for a 30-year-old wide receiver who isn't even a top 10 talent in the league. So wide receivers getting super overpaid, and Calvin Ridley, the first of that slew of wide receivers who got their bag. So the winners out of here is the Will Levis and Calvin Ridley dynasty owners and Calvin Ridley himself with getting that bag. The loser are the Tennessee Titans, who just simply overpaid for a good but not great wide receiver. Speaking of wide receivers, overpaying is starting to become a pandemic. Maybe I shouldn't use the P word, but yeah, I said it. Jerry Jeudy is signing a 3-year contract extension with the Browns after getting traded there last week. He's signing a 3-year deal worth up to $58 million, and it includes $41 million guaranteed. As Steve Smith would perhaps suggest, Jerry, just a guy, Jeudy, will stick around. And frankly, not many are exactly sure what the Browns' game plan is. They have a below average quarterback in Deshaun Watson, who has just been terrible ever since he stepped foot in Cleveland. And now they think that the answer to to the issues to pair alongside Amari Cooper is the 25-year-old Jerry Jeudy, who had a lot of promise once. Sure, last season, Jerry Jeudy ranked number 55 in route win rate, number 82 in contested catch rate, number 25 in ADOTs. He was getting a lot of those deep Broncos targets, but he wasn't necessarily converting them. Just an overall mediocre wide receiver. Jerry Jeudy is not the guy we thought he was when he was drafted number 15 overall. Jeudy, simply just not that guy. And for the Cleveland Browns to empty the wallets to sign Jerry Jeudy to an extension when they could be rebuilding the future with a brand new quarterback situation. Well, they can't really do it with the quarterback situation, given the overpayment of Watson, but they are falling prey to sunk cost fallacy, and they are now going all in on this icky offensive situation and overpaying wide receivers. And that simply is the sad truth about what's going on in the NFL offseason so far. To top it all off, we have news out of today, Tuesday, which is the Jets are signing free agent wide receiver Mike Williams to a one-year deal worth up to $15 million after the visit. So the Williams move is basically, it's very clear what's going on here. They are going to stick with Aaron Rodgers in the 2024 season. He's coming back, and they want to get him a jump ball guy. Last year, God knows why they thought Allen Lazard was the answer, but they are looking to rectify that mistake by getting a veteran in Mike Williams, who has been a deep threat his entire career. Once again, past the age apex here, age 29, but very ironically, Mike Williams' closest player comp athletically on PlayerProfiler is Allen Lazard. Obviously, Mike Williams, a much better version, a more refined player of him, a former first-round draft pick, but the injury is always a concern with him, and certainly he isn't the route winner that Garrett Wilson is, but they don't need a route winner. They need a jump ball guy. Well, they got their guy, and the Jets' offense certainly improved over what it was at last season after they for some reason thought it was a good idea to go in with Allen Lazard and Randall Cobb as the number 2 and number 3 options. And those were the 3 biggest moves of the last few days at the wide receiver position. Finally, I do want to talk about Kirk Cousins and what is going on with the Atlanta Falcons, because as you have probably already heard, the Falcons, they looked into the possibility of trading for a quarterback in the NFL draft. That already came out, but they decided that their future was Kirk Cousins. Last week, we briefly talked about what Kirk Cousins is as a player at this point of his career. A good starter in the NFL, not a great one that can elevate you into a Super Bowl squad. But credit to the Atlanta Falcons, not just for helping out fantasy managers here, stock owners of Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts, but credit to them for looking to compete. Certainly fun when a team does that and doesn't just fall into a pit of mediocrity for the rest of time. Regardless, they also made a couple of parallel moves here. They add Ray McLeod, a return specialist and someone that can line up and run some routes as well, has done so most recently for the 49ers. But they also signed Rondale Moore, just again, another meh move. Someone that isn't a great route winner, is undersized, isn't particularly going to excel at any particular skill, but he has some experience playing alongside Kyler Murray and does bring some athleticism to the table, some speed at least. So if they want to use him in the quote-unquote Deebo Samuel role, so be it. But obviously Bijan Robinson is going to dominate the majority of the short routes slash run game going forward for the Atlanta Falcons. And the biggest move that the Falcons made might not even be Kirk Cousins, because Darnell Mooney heads from Justin Fields to Kirk Cousins, and they signed him to a 3-year, $39 million deal, which is puzzling to me because Darnell Mooney, obviously a player that can be polarizing. Much of his lack of success in 2022 can be attributed to Justin Fields. I'm still of the belief that he's a solid secondary, maybe tertiary wide receiver in the NFL, a starter, but a fascinating to pay him 3 years, $39 million for a guy that, like I've said about a few wide receivers on the show, hasn't excelled at anything in particular. Certainly a serviceable player. The biggest standout here is it looks like the Falcons will go after pure athletes, someone with at least one elite athletic attribute. And for Darnell Mooney, last season, it was that he ranked number 5 in true catch rate. So I don't hate the move for Darnell Mooney if the Falcons are looking to compete this year, because Mooney, a decent guy at catching those deep balls, and has gotten the worst deep ball accuracy over the last few years in the NFL, having to deal with Justin Fields and company in Chicago. Now he gets Kirk Cousins, who is a clear upgrade over that, and the defensive attention won't be on him. It's going to be on Drake London and Kyle Pitts. So I don't mind the upgrade for the Atlanta Falcons, but that's where we stand. An interesting offense going forward for the Falcons. Kirk Cousins, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Rondale Moore, Kyle Pitts, and Tyler Algier backing them up, and Kadero Hodge and Ray McLeod, if you are playing in some DFS, could be relevant as well. That is the Atlanta Falcons. Then we got to end the show. We got to talk just for a minute on a little bit of a lighter note. We have got to talk about the Netflix show. If you haven't heard, we've got Netflix shows every single day coming out, and we have got one out of the NFL. Netflix is going to has announced its new sports series, Receiver. We've got quarterback, and we've got a parallel in the NBA, and that's going to feature Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Interesting that Netflix is continuing their relationship with the NFL. Started with quarterback, which hit Netflix Global Top 10 last year. A certainly interesting show. We are coming to the end of this short but encompassing show as we talk about the NFL offseason. The draft is coming up in just about a month. You're going to hear a lot of content from Player Profiler related to the draft. We are going to have the Breakout Finder coming out soon, which is going to give you a sense of how Player Profiler, with their athletic profiles and college profiles, rank the upcoming running backs and wide receivers of the 2024 draft class. Jaden Daniels, currently the favorite to go number 2. Drake May, currently the favorite to go number 3. But that pick by the Patriots may be up for trade. And Marvin Harrison, the favorite to go number 4. And then it can get very interesting. Malik Neighbors still on the table for first wide receiver drafted on the board, certainly within realm of possibility. J.J. McCarthy might go way too high. Offensive lineman Joe Alt, his favorite spot, landing spot right now is the number 7 pick. We have got perhaps multiple high-end receivers going in the first round, and pivotal fantasy moves will follow. But you want to get ahead of the game. You want to find where the real talent is, where the fantasy upside is. Go ahead, download the Breakout Finder. It's just the price of a cup of coffee. That was the Tuesday, March 19, 2024 show of Player Profiler Today. Was great having about 75 people in chat today. Our hosts will be here on every single day, 7 p.m. Eastern time for the rest of the NFL offseason. And I'm your Tuesday host. I'll see you next Tuesday for the next episode of Player Profiler Today that I'll be running. And maybe by then, we'll have some motion on some draft talk, maybe some trades, and everything else going on in the offseason. Y'all have a good night.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com. Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.